Hi everyone! The following episode was recorded a month ago, but we weren't able to get it out until now, until after the election. Sorry, we're a really small team and we have no money. But given the election outcome, I know many people are disappointed. And I feel your pain. I'm sad too. So I'm recording this little extra bit 2 days after the election. I'll do a full episode about the election later, but I wanted to remind all of you that our elections are not an accurate reflection of how Singaporeans think or feel, because our elections are neither free or fair. Our elections are rigged. Experts, including me, have been saying this for years and the PAP has never denied it. How else did Lisa the clairvoyant Malayan sundog accurately predict the outcome of the last 2 elections? It's like betting on the house in a casino. The house always wins. Getting upset over the outcome is like getting upset over the outcome of professional wrestling. To be fair, people still get upset about the outcome of professional wrestling. I'm still mad about the 1993 Royal Rumble where Macho Man Randy Savage tried to pin Yokozuna for the win, forgetting it was a Royal Rumble and that Yokozuna had to go over the top rope. And I know I'm not supposed to be mad because it's scripted, but I'm still upset. Oh! Anyway, let me state it plainly. Singapore is not a democracy, and our elections are designed to reduce our anger by making us think that we have a choice and that our fellow citizens collectively outvoted us. As the great Benedict Anderson pointed out, in 1998, elections were introduced into Southeast Asia by colonial powers for the purposes of pacification, by telling people, hey, no need to protest or wage revolution. Now you have the vote. So elections were introduced into the Philippines by the Americans, into Indonesia by the Dutch, into Malaya by the British to perpetuate colonialism, and then carried on by authoritarian governments because elections are a great way to make people think they actually have a choice when the outcome is easily rigged, even without stuffing the ballot box. Anderson specifically cited the PAP as a great example of this. Genuine change will never come through the electoral system as it is currently designed. I know it's very frustrating in Singapore, but don't lose hope. As I pointed out in Season 2, Episode 1, you can create change, but it's up to us to organize and pressure the government to do so. It is up to you, my fellow Singaporeans, to fight for the Singapore that you want. You can create a better Singapore. Don't be fooled into thinking that your fellow Singaporeans don't want it because they don't have a choice. Okay, on with our previously recorded episode. Hello everyone and welcome back to the show. We start first with our regular segment, POFMUD. POFMUD is basically a free fact-checking service by the PAP government, so we have made statements and asked the PAP government to POFMUD them. As I mentioned last week, the following statement has not been POFMUD by the PAP government. It is a fact that in 2020, the annual salary of Temasek CEO Ho Ching was more than 100 million Singapore dollars a year. That's an insane amount of Singaporeans' money. Madam Ho Ching, what's it like to be a real-life supervillain? How do you sleep at night? Actually, I'm pretty sure I know how she sleeps. She sleeps upside down in a robe made out of 101 Dalmatians. Okay, so for POFMUD this week, with the elections coming, here's another one from a viewer on one of Singapore's biggest recent scandals. First, it is a fact that the government wants to gazette Lee Kuan Yew's former home at 38 Oxley Road as a national monument. And second, it is a fact that the National Heritage Board report on 38 Oxley Road will, inevitably, support this conclusion, allowing the government to pretend that they are making an objective decision when in fact they have already privately decided to gazette the building and are just waiting for the election to be over with to make the formal decision. Come POFMUD me, bitches! This is the show with PJ Thum! everyone. So last week I talked about the dilemma that Dr. Goh Keng Swee posed in 1972 where he predicted the major problem that faces Singapore today. Overdependence on foreign investment, overcrowding, inequality, wages being squeezed even as GDP grows ever higher. Dr. Goh foresaw all of this in 1972. And I proposed a very simple two-question framework to help Singaporeans understand 95% of the PAP's policies. In order to understand 95% of Singapore's history under the PAP, we just need to ask two simple questions that the PAP asks themselves. First, how do we, the PAP, keep the economy of Singapore growing? And second, how do we, the PAP, keep ourselves in power? Okay, so in today's episode, I'm going to use this framework to explain how higher prices are a feature, not a bug, of the economic model. And in subsequent episodes, I'll talk about how that affects housing, healthcare, and social policy. But of course, there's only so much I can say in these videos, so if you want to go in-depth into the issues, please do read the articles we published at newnarrative.com/citizensgender-sg and also published in our book. Links in the description below. Okay, so how do we understand the sharp rise in the cost of living in Singapore?
Just follow the money.
In Singapore's economy, who profits? Who is making money? According to official statistics, about 50% of Singapore's GDP is produced by foreign companies, a third produced by the government and government-owned and controlled companies, and the rest of it is us, everyone else. Now, as the government itself makes clear, its priority is economic growth, and they believe economic success as the crucial factor which keeps them in power. In the previous episode, I explained how the PAP's economic model requires stuffing Singapore with more capital and labour in order to grow, a model that Dr. Goh Keng Swee warned was unsustainable, but the PAP do not have the courage to depart from. So we have a situation where economic growth relies on foreign direct investment. For example, in 2021 and 2022, 80% of the nominal value added to our economy came from foreign-owned companies. 80%. So when a government that is obsessed with economic growth makes policies, who has the greatest influence on those policies? Not us workers. That's right, it's foreign capitalists, people like these guys. We tell the PAP, hey, we can't afford to live. We would like higher wages, please. But they tell the PAP, hey, you gotta keep wages down so that we don't take our money and go invest elsewhere. Who do you think the PAP are going to listen to? That's right, the money. And we can do little about it because our elections are unfree and unfair, as I explained back in Season 1, Episode 2 and 3. So the government has very little incentive to care about what we, the people, think. The only thing the PAP needs to do to stay in power is to make sure we don't riot, because ultimately there are more of us than there are of them. This is why in recent years, even as life in Singapore gets worse and worse, even as everything breaks down and everything's too crowded, and even as we can't afford to live, we also have this whole increasing environment of fear. All these new laws like POFMA, the Maintenance of Racial Harmony Act now, all these crackdowns, harassing and prosecuting people under the Public Order Act, all these lawsuits and threats, chiefly orchestrated by this guy, just to keep us afraid. You know, people often compare Shan to Joseph Goebbels. Nonsense! For one thing, he likes Goebbels' warmth. But of course, you gotta have a carrot and a stick. Shan's the stick, in that he's always hard and very sticky. But we also have the carrot at the same time in the form of Lawrence Wong's handouts. In recent budgets, Wong has trumpeted massive handouts and rebates, which is a huge departure from PAP orthodoxy. Remember, Lee Kuan Yew was passionately against such welfare, famously arguing that redistribution removes motivation to work. But we don't need to go back to Lee Kuan Yew to demonstrate how bizarre the sight of such handouts by the PAP government are. We just need to go back 5 years to a current sitting minister.
I will provide $800 in CDC vouchers to every Singaporean household.
If we give everybody the same, rich or poor, how are we helping the poor?
The first $500 will be disbursed in May this year.
Some of them promise you $300 per month. No question asked.
And the remaining $300 will be disbursed in January next year.
I say, Please don't insult my residents. You think what? They are here to be bribed? No, our residents are better than that.
Each one will receive $600 in SG60 vouchers. Singaporean seniors aged 60 and above will receive $200 more, or $800 in vouchers.
If everybody give $300, you ask him, why not give 3,000? Isn't that better?
I will provide additional USAVE rebates to help households cope with their utilities expenses.
Are you making this auction, this election an auction? Pai mai hui ah. Is this an election or is this an auction? And where does the $300 come from? But please, don't look down on Singaporeans. We are not here to be bribed.
So, what on earth happened? How did the PAP go from the party of personal responsibility and hard work to the party of handouts and vouchers? It's actually pretty straightforward. You just need to understand three things. First, the PAP's economic model relies on stuffing Singapore with more capital and workers. But what also happens is more people and more money chase the same amount of goods and land, thus driving prices up. Second, at the same time, the economic model suppresses the wages of Singaporeans in order to maintain the profitability of capitalists, thus keeping our wages low. And finally, our government is incentivized to see prices rise because it itself is a capitalist and because it defines success as GDP growth. So for them, price rises are a positive thing because GDP measures the number of transactions in an economy. And that way, they are incentivized to act against the interests of Singaporean workers. So, because price rises, low wages and capital accumulation are key to the PAP economic model, the only way for them to ease our pain is to start giving some of our own money back to us. Okay, let's break everything down in turn. Right? First, Singapore's economic model is based on what economists call an extensive growth model. The PAP seeks to grow the economy by stuffing Singapore with more labour and capital. The problem is that this always leads to diminishing returns over time. I talked about this in the previous episode. Dr. Goh Keng Swee said it was unsustainable because you end up with a dangerous reliance on foreign capital and because eventually you run out of space to keep adding foreign workers. This strategy worked when we were underdeveloped, but it doesn't work anymore without the PAP's increasingly bizarre and aggressive actions. It's like trying to get more out of a plot of land by planting more seeds and putting more fertilizer on it. When the plot is underdeveloped, that works great, but eventually there's only so much that plot can produce, and we still have to import the seeds and fertilizer. So what we need to do is move to higher value crops and produce our own seeds and fertilizer so you can produce more value in the same size plot. That is what economists call an intensive growth model. That was Dr. Goh's solution, but instead of trying to implement it, the PAP just kept cramming Singapore more and more full of foreign money and low-wage foreign labour, or in other words, forcing more seeds and fertilizer in the plot. Look, Totoro is not going to show up somehow to make the plants grow to some massive size. The problem is Lee Kuan Yew and Goh Keng Swee tried this in the 1980s with the Second Industrial Revolution. But they were unwilling to release control over Singapore and were far too impatient. So they tried to legislate the changes while tightening control and not permitting genuine innovation. To keep up with our metaphor, rather than let the farmer decide what to grow and how to grow it, they told the farmer what to do, forced him to use specific crops and fertilizer whether he liked it or not, and also threatened to beat him up if he failed. Then, when he inevitably failed, they gave up and went back to the old economic model. I've gone into detail about this in the last episode of the show, so please go ahead and watch that if you'd like more detail. Okay, but what does this mean for us and our cost of living? Basically, artificially cramming Singapore full of more money and more people means that there is more money and people chasing the same number of homes and goods. This then sends prices rising. Rent is the main driver of the skyrocketing cost of living. Rich people will bid up COE prices, for example. So COE prices have, for Category A, gone from around 26,000 in 2019 to 97,000 this year. And Category B and E from 31,000 to over 120,000. Likewise, more people for a limited amount of land means prices will rise. In particular, rich people will bid up property, and that has a ripple effect on prices, as the people who can't afford houses because the prices have gone up will instead bid up condos, and the people who now can't afford condos will bid up HDB flats, and all of us Singaporeans are unable to afford homes. Likewise, as more and more people get stuffed into Singapore, our services and infrastructure go strained, and we have MRT breakdowns and crowded hospitals. The PAP government is like a stereotypical Asian mother. Has your mother ever said to you, "Hey, why you don't eat? You eat some more lah, but you've already eaten," but she's going, "Eat some more lah." So you say, "Ma, full already." But the PAP government then says, "You eat more or I cane you." So you eat. Then after all this force feeding, one day the PAP government says, "Hey, you really put on weight, huh?" And you say, "Yeah, because you make me eat so much, now I'm obese. I got diabetes, I got health problems. I can't fit into my own clothes." And then the PAP government says, "Who asked you eat so much?" And you say, "You did. You forced me to eat." And they say, "Oh, I only feed you because I care about you. Okay lah, I hand out some Panadol so your stomach doesn't hurt." But then it turns out the fatter you get, the more money the PAP government and their investors make. And they need to keep force feeding you to make more money. And that in a nutshell is the Singapore economic model. Wow, that got dark really fast. But there's another major consequence of the Second Industrial Revolution. When all that capital fled Singapore in the 1980s, the PAP government learned an important lesson. Money is power. And if you can't beat them, join them. So it became a capitalist itself so that it could use its considerable reserves to make money. And this is the period we created the Government of Singapore Investment Corporation, or GIC, and Temasek Holdings. The money to invest is, of course, our reserves. By becoming a capitalist, the government can invest the reserves and make money from exploiting labor anywhere in the world. But remember, that money, that capital, is your money, your taxes, not their money. They are reaping the profits from investing your money. You've probably seen videos like this one of former PAP MP Lee Bee Wah comparing our reserves to our Akong's savings, and those demanding more spending as being profligate spendthrifts.
有一天，阿贤问阿公：“阿公，阿公，你为什么总是3-5年才给我一笔钱？你为什么不每年都给我钱？”哇，这时候阿公听了，非常的伤心，也非常的生气。阿公以他的方言福建话破口大骂：“你这死鬼囝！你这败家子啊！你有一个真好的阿公，你阁唔知死。”
So there's this idea that we need lots of reserves for rainy days and so on. But this isn't accurate at all. First, for this story to be accurate, Ah Seng had to be giving Akong a huge amount of his income every year, both directly in terms of taxes and indirectly in terms of fees like COE, workers' levy, conservancy fees, and so on. So Ah Seng is actually just asking for his own money back. It's Akong who is hoarding it, probably for that cryptocurrency scam that Akong is running. You just know he's up to no good. He's the reason why Singaporeans are the most scammed people in the world. Second, this idea of savings does not apply to a government. Why? Because governments do not retire. Why do we save for old age? Because at some point, we will no longer be able to work and we have to retire. But governments do not retire. Governments do not stop making money. Unless the PAP is far more incompetent than we assume, the Singapore government will continue to make money every year. Listen, of course some savings is important, but
Overall, I expect to end FY 2024 with a surplus of $6.4 billion or 0.9% of GDP.
look, raising GST and taking 6.4 billion Singapore dollars from Singaporeans' pockets in the middle of a cost of living crisis? That's over $2,000 per working adult citizen. That is more than a month's salary for most Singaporeans. Why keep taking so much? The fact is that the PAP government doesn't need that money for annual expenditures. The latest government financial statement says our assets are around 1.7 trillion Singapore dollars, while the PSP's manifesto estimates our reserves at around 1.2 trillion. The government's annual budget, by comparison, is only 123 billion. So, okay, the reserves are not liquid, but the fact is we have saved around 10 to 13 times the annual budget by taking money year in and year out from the pockets of Singaporeans. If the government stopped collecting money today, it could still run for at least a decade. Why does the government need to hoard so much money? And look, all we are asking for is a balanced budget. Only take the money you need. Don't keep gobbling up our money like a bottomless pit. If there's an emergency, sure, take more to help Singaporeans. But on a normal year-by-year basis, just balance your budget and let us keep our own money. Don't hoard it away like crazy Akong. But of course, the reason is that our government does not see themselves as hoarding the money. It sees itself as investing the money. And therein lies a huge problem. Remember, the PAP government is singularly focused on economic growth as a measure of its success. We've talked about 50% of the Singapore economy being foreign, but the single biggest capitalist in Singapore, around a third of our economy, is the government itself, either directly or through the GLCs. This has led our government to increasingly think and act like a capitalist rather than as a representative of the people, by focusing on raising capital and investing people's money for maximum economic return rather than on the people's welfare. Worse, the extremely highly paid individuals who comprise the government, such as ministers and senior civil servants, are also capitalists. They themselves use their surplus capital to invest in the economy. And so they also want returns. They all want to make money and get rich. So this incentivizes the government to pass policies which make money for capitalists and which raise land prices rather than policies which make life better for people. The most obvious example of this, of course, is wage suppression. The easiest way for capitalists to make money is by exploiting people and taking the profits from their labor. If we raise wages, foreign and local capitalists, including the government itself, will make less money. What does it all mean? Okay, think about the value of your work. Let's say as an employee you produce $5,000 worth of output for the owner of your company, but he only pays you $2,000. That means he is profiting $3,000 from your labor. Now, of course, he invested money to start the company and so deserves to make some profit, but what is a fair wage? Historically, a fair wage has been determined through collective bargaining, where the workers get together, form a union and negotiate collectively for a fair wage. But of course, Singapore does not have independent unions. The thing is, wages should normally increase as profits increase, but they are held down artificially low because we do not have independent unions to collectively fight for higher wages. Worse, Singapore has a tripartite model where the government, capitalists/employers, and unions negotiate over wages, working conditions, and so forth. But the problem is the government itself is a major investor in the employers and also controls NTUC. So this tripartite alliance actually consists of three groups: capitalists, and people controlled by capitalists. It's a total conflict of interest. It's like three wolves at a table voting on what they want to do with the sheep. How do you think they are voting? And of course, Singaporeans' wages are also suppressed by the continual import of low-wage foreign labour. But it's not just because capitalists can pay foreign workers less. That's true, but it's not quite the whole story. So, according to this article from 2020, a foreign construction worker makes just 800 Sing dollars or less a month. We tried to find out how much a similar Singaporean worker can make, and we ended up with a lot of different numbers. But the important thing is that the lowest number we could find is still 2,000 Sing dollars a month, with most estimates being 2,500 to 2,900. So a foreign construction worker creates the same value as a Singaporean construction worker, but is paid far less, allowing the construction company to take away far more value as profit. And this is the easiest and fastest way to make economic gains, as Goh Chok Tong, Lee Hsien Loong, and Tharman have all pointed out. See my previous episode. This depresses the wage of Singaporeans and disincentivizes Singaporean companies from becoming more productive. This is also why, for example, Minister of State Amy Khor defended the extremely unsafe practice of construction companies ferrying foreign workers on the back of lorries on the basis of profitability.
Taking such an approach will have a significant impact on the viability of our SMEs.
Insisting on clean food and water also affects the viabilities of catering companies. So why ban us from eating crab? And arguments about cost certainly did not stop your government from banning the transport of school children by lorry in 1961. Ultimately, if all this is confusing, remember this. You, the Singaporean worker, are being exploited and not given fair wages, and low-wage foreign labour makes it easier for the government to exploit you. It is the capitalists, not Singaporean workers, who are the chief exploiter of low-wage foreign labour in Singapore. And the single biggest capitalist in Singapore, who makes the most profits from the exploitation of labour, is the PAP government itself. And this helps us answer why the government raises GST even when the cost of living and inflation are so high. Because when we understand the PAP government not as a government but as a capitalist investor, then raising more capital and investing it is, from its perspective, more productive than letting Singaporeans keep our own hard-earned money. The PAP government has shown a consistent preference to take your money out of your pocket and then spend it for you and then give you a little back, right? Usually as a voucher or a rebate, which means you can still only spend it on the things they want you to spend it on. And as I mentioned, the Singapore government runs a budget surplus. Over $6 billion last year and another $6 billion this year. It has consistently taken more money from us than it actually needs to put into the reserves. It then invests the reserves but returns at least half of those profits back to the reserves. In other words, the government has been extracting wealth from Singaporeans for over 3 decades in order to use our money as capital for its own purposes. The GST raise is part of this logic. But this has a real impact on Singaporeans because this has suppressed Singaporeans' wealth, investment and consumption far below levels in comparable economies. If we had kept our own savings, we could have invested our own money and gotten the returns for us to then spend or further invest. We would be a lot richer. But from the PAP government's perspective, if it lets us keep our own money, it can't invest it. So it thinks we are smart enough to earn our own money, but not smart enough to be trusted with spending it. So better that they take our money from us and spend it for us on nice things like ERP 2.0 or screwing up Simply Go or losing 377 million Sing dollars of money in FTX without doing any due diligence. To be fair, Temasek said that it, quote, conducted an extensive due diligence process on FTX, unquote, over 8 months from February to October 2021. Gosh, who was the incompetent person in charge of Temasek during this time? Oh. This is what they are taking our money to do. We may, on paper, earn a lot of money and have high GDP, but the reality is very different. A 2021 research study, for example, estimated that, quote, around 30% of all working households earn less than the amount required to meet their basic needs, unquote. And that's why a study by researchers at SMU showed that 10% of Singaporean households go hungry at least once each year, with 40% of those households experiencing food insecurity at least once a month. People are poor and starving in Singapore. And it's all because of an economic model which prizes economic growth and keeping the PAP in power over the interest and welfare of the people. Okay, still confused? Have a look at this.
If I bring another 32,600 high-value immigrants like I did last year, it will increase the amount of capital in Singapore, leading to a GDP rise.
Yes, Minister. Good idea.
And if we keep wages down, foreign companies can keep making good profits, so they will keep investing in Singapore.
Yes, Minister. Good idea.
Wow. Who are these people? Bidding up COE prices, bidding up the rent. What to do? I have to raise prices or go out of business. Prices are going up. We'll have to cut our spending.
Maybe we can reduce our voice tuition.
But no, we just have to spend less on food. His future is too important.
Maybe I can ask my boss for a raise. The company is making big profits. Surely they can afford it. Minister, people are complaining about cost of living.
Okay. We will raise revenue so we can give it back to the people in the form of rebates and vouchers. Raise GST.
Yes, Minister, good idea. But wouldn't that hit the poorest the hardest? How about we don't raise GST, let the people keep their own money?
They will just spend it on frivolous things, like free meals at a food court instead of a hawker center. Better we take their money and give them vouchers and rebates so we know for sure that they are spending on proper things. That way, we lower living costs, but extra spending from GST will still raise GDP. Win-win.
Yes, Minister, good idea.
GST going up. Electricity, gas, water, petrol, healthcare. All my costs going up. I have to raise prices again. So how?
My boss said no. If I'm not happy, I can quit. I asked my union, but they said they can't do anything to help.
There's been another GST rise. Everything's getting more expensive.
I'll have to get a second part-time job.
I suppose we're not having another child.
Siao! Good news, Minister. Average household income is up, spending is up, and so GDP is up.
My policies work.
And our bonuses are tied to GDP.
Shh! We don't talk about that.
Okay, that's our show. See you next time. Hello everyone. Grouchy the Malayan Sun Bear here with a big thank you to all our members who've supported us so loyally all these years. The work we do takes up so much time and money, and we're a very small team working tirelessly across Southeast Asia, and we're so grateful for your support. New Narrative is a movement to democratize democracy in Southeast Asia, and it's supported by its members, people like you. So we need your help to keep fighting. If you've enjoyed this video and would like to see more, please do join New Narrative as a member or donate to New Narrative. If you become a member, you gain access to our website with all our wonderful articles and videos and comics and podcasts. And you can also interact with other like-minded people who are fighting for a better Southeast Asia, including all our team members, and have wonderful conversations about important issues in a constructive way. So, please consider becoming a member. It's as low as $5 a month, or donate to New Narrative at newnarrative.com/donate. Please like and subscribe to this video, and please share. Thank you very much.